At the airport. After an argument, my parents and sister voided my ticket and abandoned me stranded in Europe, no phones, all broken, in no wallet, no way out. Multimillionaire leaned closer and murmured, "Pretend you're my wife. My driver's on the way." He smiled coldly. "Trust me. They'll regret this." Opening with a soft, almost disbelieving tone, a beat of silence, then a sharp, indignant edge. "Can you even imagine being abandoned, completely stranded in a foreign country, by your own family?" My phone was dead, my wallet gone, and my parents and sister had just walked away, leaving me high and dry in a bustling European airport. And then, a complete stranger, a multimillionaire, leans in and whispers, "Pretend you're my wife. My driver's coming. Trust me, they'll regret this." What the hell do you do in a moment like that? The fluorescent lights of Frankfurt Airport hummed, a cruel, indifferent lullaby as I stood there, frozen in Terminal 1. I watched them walk away, my mother, my father, and my sister, their backs to me, disappearing through security like I was just a ghost they'd conjured and now wished to vanish. My mom never looked back. My dad's jaw was set, that familiar stubborn line of "I've made up my mind." And my sister? She just clicked her expensive luggage along, a perfect picture of their perfect world, oblivious. They had actually done it. They cancelled my ticket. They left me there. The fight, oh God, the fight. It started over something so stupid, so utterly trivial, it still makes my stomach clench. We were having lunch in Munich, just a casual meal, when my sister dropped her wedding bombshell. She wanted me to pay for 7 custom-made bridesmaid dresses, imported from Milan. We're talking $3,000. I teach 3rd grade, okay? My salary barely covers my life, let alone a runway show. I tried to explain, gently, that I couldn't afford it. And that's when she called me selfish. It was like a switch flipped. My mother immediately jumped in, reminding me how my sister had always been there for me. My father chimed in with his usual, "Family comes first, always." And just like that, the floodgates opened. Years of unspoken resentments, old grievances, they all surfaced like corpses from a murky lake. My choice of a state college over their fancy private university. My decision to become a teacher instead of joining their prestigious real estate business. Moving across the country to Portland, away from Boston, away from them. "You've always been ungrateful," my mother's voice had cut through the restaurant, sharp enough to draw blood. "We paid for this entire trip to Europe, and you can't even do this one thing for your sister." I'd offered what I could, maybe $500. It wasn't good enough. Nothing I ever did was good enough unless it was exactly what they demanded. The fight raged on at the hotel. My sister screaming that I was ruining her wedding. My father, his voice heavy with disappointment, warning that if I couldn't prioritize family, maybe I shouldn't be part of this family vacation. Then, the chilling calm settled on my mother's face. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she made a phone call. To the airline. She'd booked all our tickets on her credit card, giving her the power to make changes. When I reached for my purse, she snatched it away. "You can have it back at the airport, when you've calmed down and apologized to your sister," she'd said, her eyes cold as ice. I thought they were bluffing. Of course, I did. They were my family. They weren't. Now, I stood in that airport, utterly alone, with nothing but my passport tucked into my jacket pocket. My phone was dead, its charger in my suitcase, which was already on its way to Boston. My wallet? Oh, that was in my purse, which my mother had insisted on carrying for safekeeping during our museum visit that morning. I had €0, $0, and 0 options. Panic. It clawed at my throat, a cold, sharp talon. I stumbled to the airline counter. But without any ID beyond my passport, and no way to pay for a new ticket, they couldn't help. The woman behind the desk offered a sympathetic look that somehow made everything 10 times worse. I asked to use a phone, but international calling required a credit card deposit. I was completely, hopelessly stuck. I walked back into the main terminal, my legs shaking, every nerve humming with humiliation and disbelief. Other travelers rushed past, all with places to go, people waiting for them. I sank onto a bench near a coffee shop, trying to think through the hazy fog of shock. How had it come to this? Years, I realized, years of slowly giving in, of being the peacekeeper, of swallowing my own needs just to keep the family harmony. Every boundary I tried to set was met with accusations. Difficult. Ungrateful. Selfish. My sister had been the golden child since birth, and I was just expected to facilitate her shine. Excuse me? A man's voice, smooth and deep, broke through my swirling thoughts. Are you all right? I looked up. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair and a distinguished touch of silver at the temples. His suit was expensive, the kind that whispered wealth, didn't shout it. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but there was no cruelty there. Just curiosity. I'm fine, I lied, the word tasting like ash. He glanced around the empty space next to me. No luggage, no bag, nothing. You don't look fine. You look like someone just pulled the ground out from under you. Something about his directness, his refusal to accept my flimsy lie, cracked the dam I'd been holding back. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. My family, they left me here, I choked out. They cancelled my ticket home. And they took everything I had with them. His expression shifted, a flash of cold, hard anger flickering in his eyes. They took your belongings? My phone, my wallet, my luggage, everything. I wiped at my face with the back of my hand, feeling so utterly pathetic. We had a fight, and they just left. He sat down beside me, without asking permission. What's your name? Natalie. Natalie Morrison. Natalie, he said, extending a hand. I'm James Ashford. His handshake was firm, confident. I'm about to make you an unusual offer. My driver is picking me up in 20 minutes. I'm heading to my home outside Heidelberg. You can come with me, get sorted out, and I'll help you get back to the States. I just stared at him, my mouth probably hanging open. Why would you do that? Because I know what it's like to have family betray you. His voice held an edge, a deep, old pain I instantly recognized. And because I have the means to help, and you clearly need it. He paused, studying my face, then a hint of a smile touched his lips. Also, my family is going to be at my house tonight. My parents, specifically. They've been pressuring me about my personal life, questioning my choices, making demands. If you're willing to play along as my wife for one evening, I'll make it very much worth your while. Your wife? I squeaked. I must have looked as bewildered as I felt. A mutually beneficial arrangement, he explained, completely unfazed. You need help, and I need my parents off my back for one night. They want me married, settled, conforming to their expectations. You show up on my arm, and they'll back off. In exchange, I'll pay for your flight home, replace your phone, and give you $5,000 for your trouble. It was insane. Absolutely, ludicrously insane. Accepting help from a stranger. Pretending to be his wife. Staying at his house. Every single safety lesson I'd ever learned screamed warnings in my head. But what other choice did I have? Sleep in the airport until I could somehow reach the American embassy? Even then, getting home would take days. I'd miss work, probably lose my job, and end up in crushing debt trying to cover emergency travel documents. I was desperate. James seemed to read my hesitation. I'm not a dangerous person, Natalie. Here. He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. Call someone. Tell them where you are, who you're with. I'll wait. I took the phone with trembling hands and dialed my best friend, Emma. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Emma. It's me, Natalie. Nat? Whose number is this? Are you okay? I explained everything in a breathless rush. The fight, the abandoned ticket, the stranger's unbelievable offer. Emma was silent for a long moment. Send me his full name and a picture. Stay on the line while I look him up. I heard frantic typing in the background. James sat patiently, seemingly unbothered by the scrutiny. Then, Emma's voice, a shocked whisper. Holy hell, Nat James Ashford? The venture capitalist? He's legitimate. Forbes list, major tech investments, philanthropist. There are like 100 articles about him. More typing. Okay. He seems clean. No scandals, no criminal record I can find. But Nat, are you sure about this? I don't have many options right now, I admitted, my voice small. Then keep me updated. Text me every few hours. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling the embassy and every police department in Germany. I will, I promised, and handed the phone back to James. He smiled slightly. Feel better? A little, I confessed. His driver arrived exactly on time, a professional-looking man in his 60s who greeted James warmly and showed no surprise at my presence. The car was a Mercedes, luxurious but understated. As we drove through the German countryside, James explained the full picture. His parents had built their fortune in manufacturing and expected him to follow a traditional path, take over the family business, marry someone from their social circle, produce heirs. But James had struck out on his own, made his own fortune in tech, and remained unmarried at 46. His mother had recently ramped up her campaign to see him settled, even arranging surprise dinner parties with eligible daughters of her friends. Tonight is supposed to be a small family dinner, he said, watching the scenery roll past. My parents, my younger brother and his wife, and me. They've already warned me they're bringing someone for me to meet again. He looked at me, a wry smile playing on his lips. And I'm your escape plan. You're my statement. I'm perfectly capable of finding someone myself, and I don't need their interference. He added, sensing my unease, I won't ask you to do anything uncomfortable. We'll have dinner. You'll stay in the guest house. And tomorrow, I'll have my assistant help you sort everything out. That's it. Why not just tell them the truth? I asked. That you don't want to be set up? He sighed, the wryness gone, replaced by a deep bitterness. I've told them repeatedly. They don't listen. They think they know what's best. He looked out the window. Some families operate under the assumption that love means control. We arrived at his estate an hour later. It was breathtaking, a converted manor with modern additions that somehow blended seamlessly, surrounded by immaculate grounds. James showed me to the guest house, a charming cottage with its own bedroom, bathroom, and sitting area. Dinner is in 2 hours, he said. There's a closet in there with various clothing options, different sizes. My assistant keeps them for guests. Find something that fits and feels comfortable. No pressure to be anyone other than yourself. After he left, I showered, feeling the grime of the day wash away, physically and emotionally. In the closet, I found a simple navy dress that fit surprisingly well and low heels that didn't make me feel like I was playing dress-up. My reflection in the mirror showed exhaustion around my eyes, but I looked presentable. James knocked at 7 sharp. He'd changed into dark slacks and a crisp white button-down, casual, but refined. Ready? The main house was even more impressive inside, modern art on the walls, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking lush gardens. His parents were already in the sitting room when we entered. His mother, Constance Ashford, was exactly what I'd imagined. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer outfit, assessing eyes that took in every detail of my appearance in about 3 seconds. His father, Robert, stood beside her, distinguished and stern. Mother, father, James said smoothly, his hand settling on the small of my back, a subtle, possessive touch. I'd like you to meet my wife, Natalie. The silence was spectacular. Constance's mouth actually fell open. Robert's eyebrows shot up. James's brother, Thomas, who'd been examining a painting, spun around so fast he nearly spilled his drink. Your wife? Constance finally managed, her voice laced with disbelief. James, what are you talking about? Natalie and I were married 3 weeks ago in Portland. We've been keeping it quiet, but since you insisted on tonight's dinner, I thought it was time to introduce her properly. I channeled every ounce of poise I possessed, giving them my best, most radiant smile. It's wonderful to meet you all. James has told me so much about his family. Constance looked like she might faint. 3 weeks? You've been married for 3 weeks and didn't tell us? We wanted to enjoy being newlyweds before the circus started, James said calmly, his eyes glinting with amusement. You understand? Thomas approached us, a wide grin spreading across his face. Well, this is unexpected. Congratulations. He shook my hand warmly, and I could see the amusement dancing in his eyes. He knew something was up, but seemed perfectly willing to play along. Dinner was fascinating and excruciating in equal measure. Constance peppered me with questions, trying to catch inconsistencies in a story James and I hadn't had time to coordinate. Where did we meet? How long had we known each other? What did I do for work? I stuck as close to the truth as possible. I'm a teacher in Portland, 3rd grade. James and I met through mutual friends about 8 months ago. That last part was a complete fabrication, but it rolled off my tongue smoothly. A teacher, Constance repeated, her tone suggesting I'd just said garbage collector. How quaint. I find it very rewarding, I replied, keeping my voice pleasant, working with children, helping them discover learning, it's meaningful work. I'm sure it is, dear. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, though I imagine the salary is quite modest. The implication hung heavy in the air, gold digger. James's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. Natalie's passion for her work is one of the things I love most about her, he said, his voice carrying a subtle warning. She does what she loves, not what's expected or profitable. It's refreshing. Robert cleared his throat. Son, this is all very sudden. You must understand our surprise. I understand you're upset that I didn't follow the script you wrote for my life, James replied, his voice firm. But I'm 46 years old. I don't need permission to make my own choices. The rest of dinner passed in intense small talk. Thomas's wife, Andrea, was genuinely kind and asked real questions about teaching, which I appreciated. She seemed as uncomfortable with Constance's interrogation as I was. After dessert, James suggested we take a walk in the gardens. Once we were outside and safely out of earshot, he exhaled heavily. I'm sorry. She was worse than I anticipated. It's fine, I said, a dry laugh escaping me. I've dealt with difficult family dynamics before. Obviously. We walked in silence for a while, the garden lights casting soft pools of illumination along the path. Finally, James spoke again. What happened with your family? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I'm curious. So, I told him. All of it. The years of being second choice, of my sister's relentless demands, and my parents enabling every single one. The constant expectation that I would sacrifice myself on the altar of family peace. The final fight over bridesmaids' dresses that had been the last, final straw for them. They've always made me feel like I owe them something, I confessed, my voice raw. Like my very existence is a debt I can never repay. Nothing I do is good enough, unless it's exactly what they want. James nodded slowly. My parents are similar. Just wrapped in different packaging. Control disguised as concern. Manipulation dressed up as love. He paused by a fountain, looking at the shimmering water. My brother plays along. He married the daughter of one of my father's business associates, joined the family company, had 2 children right on schedule. He seems happy, but I always wonder if he actually is, or if he's just good at pretending. Do you talk to him about it? Not really. Thomas chose his path, and I chose mine. We're cordial, but not close. There was a quiet regret in his voice. That's the price of refusing to conform. You lose people. We returned to the house to find Constance waiting in the sitting room. Robert had apparently retired for the evening, and Thomas and Andrea had left. She sat in a high-backed chair, like a queen on her throne, absolutely rigid. James, I'd like to speak with you privately. Anything you need to say can be said in front of Natalie, James replied coolly, his arm around my waist, a silent show of solidarity. Constance's lips thinned. Very well. This marriage is a mistake. You barely know this girl. She's clearly not from our world, and this impulsive decision will have consequences. The only mistake was not doing this sooner, James countered, his voice like ice. Natalie is exactly what I want. Genuine, kind, and completely uninterested in your approval or your money. She's a teacher, Constance scoffed, as if that explained everything. What could you possibly have in common? More than you'd think, James said, a slow smile spreading on his face, but his eyes were serious. We both know what it's like to have family that values obedience over authenticity. The difference is, Natalie got out. She built a life doing what she loves, and she doesn't apologize for it. I wanted to interrupt, to say something, but this felt like a conversation decades in the making. Constance stood, her posture rigid with fury. I see I'm wasting my breath. But mark my words, James. This will end badly, and when it does, don't come crying to me. She swept out of the room, leaving behind a faint scent of expensive perfume and wounded pride. James sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking utterly exhausted. I'm sorry you had to witness that. Don't be, I said, sitting beside him. Thank you for what you said. About me getting out and not apologizing. He looked at me, really looked at me. Did I get out? I wondered aloud, the question of painful self-reflection. I mean, I moved 3,000 miles away and built a completely different life. But I still answer their calls. I still feel guilty when I don't meet their expectations. I still let them make me feel small. Tonight proved I never really escaped. They can still control me with their approval, or lack thereof. You know what I think? James leaned back, his expression thoughtful. I think tonight was your declaration of independence. You just don't realize it yet. They left you with nothing, expecting you to come crawling back, begging for help. Instead, you found your own way. You're going to go home on your own terms, with your own resources, and they're going to realize they don't have the power they thought they did. Something clicked into place in my mind. He was right. My family had played their trump card, and it hadn't worked. I hadn't collapsed. I hadn't called them, begging for rescue. I'd found a solution myself, with help from an unexpected source, but still, on my own terms. What if I don't want to just go home? The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise James. What if I want them to actually feel consequences for what they did? James smiled, and there was something sharp, almost dangerous, in it. Now you're speaking my language. What did you have in mind? We talked until 2 a.m, planning. James had connections everywhere, including Boston. By the time I finally returned to the guest house, I felt electric with possibility, instead of crushed by defeat. The next morning, James's assistant, Klaus, appeared with a new phone, already set up and activated. He also brought a credit card in my name. Mr. Ashford has opened a temporary account for you, Klaus explained in perfect English. Use it for whatever you need. There's also clothing being delivered this afternoon, sized according to the items you wore last night. This is too much, I protested, feeling a rush of unfamiliar gratitude and unease. Klaus replied with a small, knowing smile. Mr. Ashford was quite clear about his instructions. Please don't make my job difficult by refusing. I spent the day setting up my new phone and making calls. Emma first, of course, to let her know I was safe and fill her in on everything. She was skeptical but supportive. Then I called my school district and explained there had been a family emergency and I needed to use my personal days. My principal was understanding. The third call was to my bank. I reported my debit card stolen and requested a new one sent to James's address, which Klaus had assured me was fine. While I was at it, I checked my account balance. My family had always had access to my accounts, something I never questioned since my parents had helped me open them when I turned 18. The balance was lower than it should have been. $3,000 lower. My hands shook as I called the bank back and requested a full transaction history. The representative emailed it to me within minutes. There, clear as day, were 3 separate ATM withdrawals over 2 days, from locations in Munich, each for $1,000 to stay within daily limits. The times matched exactly when my sister had claimed she was going shopping. My sister had systematically drained money from my account. $3,000. The exact amount she wanted for the bridesmaids' dresses. I sat staring at the screen, a cold, hard rage building in my chest like a storm. James found me an hour later, still sitting there, my phone clenched in my hand. What happened? I showed him the transaction history. His expression went cold and hard, mirroring my own. Did you authorize this? No, I whispered. But she has my PIN. We used to share account information for emergencies. I laughed bitterly. I guess this qualified in her mind. That's theft, James stated, his voice flat. It's family, I said automatically, then stopped. No. You're right. It's theft. James pulled out his own phone. I'm calling my attorney. This, combined with them stranding you, abandoning you without resources, potentially constitutes several crimes, depending on how we frame it. I don't want to press charges, I said quickly. You don't have to, he replied, but you should know your options. He paused, his gaze softening slightly. Natalie, people who love you don't steal from you. They don't abandon you in foreign countries. They don't punish you for having boundaries. Over the next few days, a plan truly came together. James's attorney, a sharp woman named Petra, laid out exactly what legal standing I had. The theft was clear-cut. The abandonment was murkier, but still actionable, especially since I'd been left without access to my own belongings or money. But I didn't want legal action. I wanted something else entirely. James made a phone call to a friend who ran a lifestyle magazine based in Boston. Another call went to a contact at a major newspaper. A third went to someone in his business network who knew my father's real estate company well. Here's what I'm thinking, James said as we sat in his study, planning our next move. Your family operates on image and status. Correct? Completely, I affirmed, a grim satisfaction forming in my gut. Appearances are everything to them. Then we use that, he said, a glint in his eye. We let it slip to the right people that you've married a wealthy investor. We make sure your family sees you thriving, not just surviving. We demonstrate that their attempt to control you backfired spectacularly. A performance, I said slowly, savoring the words. A strategic revelation of your new circumstances, he corrected, a smirk playing on his lips. Let them draw their own conclusions about how their actions affected you. It felt petty. It felt manipulative. It felt absolutely perfect. The article came out 3 weeks later in a Boston Society magazine. It featured a photo of James and me at a charity gala in Heidelberg, me wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The headline read, Tech investor James Ashford makes rare public appearance with new wife, teacher Natalie Morrison. The article itself was tasteful, mentioning our whirlwind romance, my career in education, and James's philanthropic work. It noted that we'd met through mutual friends 8 months ago and married quietly 3 weeks prior. There was even a quote from James about being impressed by my dedication to my students and my independence. My phone started ringing within hours. I had already changed my number, but Emma, bless her heart, had given the new one to my mother after receiving dozens of frantic calls. Emma apologized profusely, saying my mother had claimed there was a family emergency and she needed to reach me immediately. I let every call go to voicemail. My mother's message was first, Natalie, this is ridiculous. Call me immediately. We need to discuss this situation. My father's was shorter, more clipped, what are you playing at? Call home. My sister left 3 messages, each progressively more frantic. The last one was enlightening, Nat, please. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying you've embarrassed the family. Just call and explain what's going on. Is this about the dresses? I'll find another way to pay for them. Just call me back. I deleted them all. The second wave came when the story was picked up by a larger publication, this time with more details about James's net worth and business success. His estimated fortune was listed as well into 9 figures. That article even included a photo from dinner at his parents' house. Thomas, finding the whole situation quite amusing, had snapped it and leaked it to a journalist friend. In the photo, James and I looked comfortable and happy, his arm around my shoulders. My mother's next voicemail was different. Syrupy sweet. Natalie, honey, we've been so worried about you. When you disappeared from the airport, we were frantic. Please call and let us know you're safe. We love you and want to talk. The revisionist history was stunning. They'd been worried? They cancelled my ticket and took all my belongings, but acknowledging that would mean admitting fault, and my family simply didn't operate that way. James's attorney sent a formal letter to my parents' address, demanding the return of my belongings and the $3,000 my sister had stolen. The letter was professional but unmistakable in its implications. Further action would be taken if restitution wasn't made promptly. My suitcase arrived via Express International shipping a week later. Everything was there, including my wallet, completely intact. A cashier's check for $3,000 was included, along with a brief note in my mother's handwriting, "We'd like to talk when you're ready." I wasn't ready. I might never be ready, on their terms. James and I settled into an unusual routine. I stayed in the guest house, working remotely with my students through video calls and lesson plans I'd arranged with my substitute teacher. James worked from his home office. We had dinner together most evenings, talking about everything and nothing. What's your actual relationship status? I asked one night over wine on his terrace. I mean, your real one, not the performance for your parents. Single, he said simply. I was married once, briefly, in my 20s. It ended badly. Since then, I've dated, but never found someone I wanted to build a life with. Most people in my social circle are interested in what I have, not who I am. That sounds lonely, I mused. It is, he admitted. But it's better than pretending with someone who doesn't really see you. I understood that completely. My whole life had been pretending, performing the role of the obedient daughter while my real self stayed hidden and small. What happens when I go home? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. We can't keep up a married charade forever. We let it fade naturally. You return to Portland. I stay here. We remain friendly. If anyone asks, we're navigating a long-distance relationship and keeping our private life private. He paused, looking at me. Unless, you don't want to go home yet. What do you mean? Stay longer. Take the time you need to figure out what you actually want, not what your family expects. Klaus can help you extend your leave from work. You could even teach English here if you wanted, make some money, have an adventure. It was tempting. So incredibly tempting. The thought of going back to my apartment, my routine, my carefully constructed life that suddenly felt so small and constricting, made my chest tight. "I'll think about it," I said. My mother called again 3 days later. This time, I answered. "Natalie, thank goodness. We've been so worried." Her voice was dripping with false concern. "Have you?" My voice was flat, emotionless. "Of course we have, sweetheart. We never meant for things to go so far. We thought you'd just miss one flight and catch another. We didn't realize you didn't have your wallet." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I wondered how many times she'd rehearsed it. "You canceled my ticket and took all my belongings, Mom. That's not a misunderstanding. That's deliberate. We were upset. The things you said about your sister, about us, they were hurtful. We reacted poorly." A pause. "But this marriage, Natalie, it's so sudden. We're concerned you're making rash decisions because you're angry with us." "I'm not angry," I said, and realized it was true. The rage had burned out, leaving something colder and clearer behind. "I'm done." "Done? What does that mean?" Her voice took on an injured, confused tone. "It means I'm not playing this game anymore. The game where you set the rules and move the goalposts and punish me when I don't perform correctly. I'm not the supporting character in your family story anymore." "That's not fair," she cried, her voice cracking. "We've always supported you." "No," I stated calmly, firmly. "You've always supported the version of me that did what you wanted. The real me, the one who became a teacher and moved away and has her own opinions. You've made it very clear that version isn't good enough. Natalie, please, let's discuss this calmly. Come home, bring your husband. We'll have a proper family dinner and sort everything out. So you can interrogate him? Judge whether he meets your standards? Decide if my choices are acceptable?" I scoffed. "No, thank you. We just want to meet him properly. He's family now. He's my family. You lost that privilege when you left me stranded in a foreign country with no resources and no way to get home. We sent your things back. We returned the money. Only after getting a letter from an attorney. Only after realizing I wasn't going to come crawling back, begging for help." My voice stayed calm, which somehow made the words hit harder. "You played a power game, and you lost. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Then, your sister is very hurt by all of this." "My sister stole $3,000 from my bank account. She doesn't get to be hurt. That was a misunderstanding. She thought you'd agree to pay for the dresses by taking the money without asking. That's called theft, Mom. Normal families don't operate this way. We are not abnormal." Her voice turned sharp, the mask finally slipping. "We are your family and you have obligations." "No," I whispered, but my voice was steady. "I don't. That's what you've never understood. Love isn't an obligation. Support isn't conditional. Family doesn't mean ownership." I felt tears on my cheeks, but they weren't sad tears. They were cleansing. "I'm not your emotional support child or your sister's personal ATM or your performing doll anymore. I'm done." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter than I had in years. James found me on the terrace an hour later. "I heard raised voices," he said, his eyes kind. "Not yours, but I assume you were on the phone." "I told my mother I was done with their games," I confirmed. He sat beside me. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Relieved. Free. I wiped my eyes. Like I just jumped off a cliff and haven't hit the ground yet. You haven't hit the ground because you're flying, he said quietly, a small smile touching his lips. You just don't recognize it yet. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the gardens. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, my father and sister, both demanding I call back, explain myself, stop being dramatic. I turned the phone off. I want to stay, I said suddenly, surprising myself. Not forever, but longer. A few months, maybe. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to manage their emotions or meet their expectations. James smiled. Klaus will be thrilled. He's been hoping you'd stay. He thinks you're a civilizing influence on me. I'm unemployed and staying in your guest house. How is that civilizing? I laughed. You make me actually stop for meals. You ask about my day. You remind me there's more to life than work and parental approval. He looked at me seriously. Stay as long as you want. No strings, no expectations. Just figure out what you need. Over the next months, I did exactly that. I picked up some English tutoring jobs in Heidelberg, working with children and adults. I explored Germany and neighboring countries. I read books I'd always meant to read. I started writing, journaling my thoughts and experiences, discovering my own voice. One of my students was a 10-year-old girl named Hannah whose parents were going through a difficult divorce. She reminded me so much of my younger self, trying to hold everything together, trying to be perfect so maybe her parents would stop fighting. During our sessions, I found myself teaching her more than English. I taught her that she wasn't responsible for adult problems, that her worth wasn't determined by how well she managed other people's emotions. Her mother noticed the change in Hannah's confidence and asked what I was doing differently. I explained my approach, focusing on emotional vocabulary and healthy boundaries alongside language learning. She broke down crying, saying Hannah had started standing up for herself, saying no when shuttle between households became too much, expressing her actual feelings instead of playing peacekeeper. That conversation planted a seed. Education wasn't just about academics. Children needed tools to navigate complex family situations, to recognize manipulation, to build self-worth that wasn't dependent on parental approval. The curriculum ideas started forming then, scribbled in notebooks during quiet evenings. James noticed my excitement when I talked about it. He introduced me to an educational consultant in Stuttgart who helped me refine the concepts. We met for coffee weekly, developing frameworks for age-appropriate lessons on emotional intelligence, healthy communication, and recognizing dysfunction. The consultant, a woman named Ingrid, had her own history with controlling parents. She understood the mission viscerally. Meanwhile, James's mother made one last attempt to undermine our supposed marriage. She showed up unannounced one afternoon while James was in Berlin for business. Klaus had led her onto the property, assuming James would want to see his mother, though he apologized profusely afterward when he realized the visit wasn't welcome. Constance sat in the main house drawing room like she owned the place, which technically she didn't. But generations of wealth gave her an air of ownership wherever she went. Natalie, I think we should have an honest conversation, she began, her tone suggesting she was doing me a tremendous favor. About what? I kept my voice neutral, pouring myself tea without offering her any. She already had a cup. About what you're really doing here. James is generous to a fault, especially with strays. But this charade has gone on long enough. She smiled, sharp and cold. How much will it take for you to end this quietly? Name your price. The audacity took my breath away. You're trying to pay me to divorce your son? I'm offering you a comfortable exit from a situation that benefits neither of you. James needs someone from his world, someone who understands the responsibilities that come with his position. You're a lovely girl, but you're clearly out of your depth. Something crystallized in that moment. This was exactly what my own mother did, reframing manipulation as concern, control as care. The tactics were identical, even if the packaging differed. "Mrs. Ashford," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I'm not going to dignify that with a counteroffer. But I will tell you this, your son is one of the most genuine, kind, and self-aware people I've ever met. And he became that despite your attempts to mold him into someone else entirely. Whatever happens between James and me is our business, not yours." Her expression hardened. "You'll regret speaking to me this way. Probably not as much as you'll regret underestimating both of us." She left in a fury of expensive perfume and wounded pride. When James returned and I told him about the encounter, he laughed until tears ran down his face. "She tried to buy you off? That's a new low even for her." He shook his head, still grinning. "What did you say?" I recounted the conversation. His expression shifted to something warmer, more genuine. "Thank you for defending me. Most people just agree with whatever she says to keep the peace." "I'm done keeping peace at the expense of truth," I said. "That's what got me stranded at an airport in the first place." James and I maintained the appearance of marriage for his family's benefit, but privately, we developed a deep friendship. We understood each other in ways I'd never experienced. We both knew what it meant to be seen only as extensions of family expectations, rather than individuals with our own dreams. My family's attempts at contact gradually decreased. They sent cards for Thanksgiving and Christmas, addressed to both James and me, full of surface pleasantries and no real substance. I sent polite thank you notes back. We were cordial strangers now, and that felt right. 6 months after the airport incident, I returned to Portland. Not because I was running back to my old life, but because I had figured out what I wanted to do next. James and I had staged our divorce a month earlier, releasing a statement about wanting different things and remaining friends. I resigned from my teaching position and used the money James had paid me, along with my savings, to start developing an educational curriculum focused on emotional intelligence and healthy family dynamics for elementary students. James invested in the project, not as my fake husband, but as a friend who truly believed in the work. His business contacts helped me connect with schools and publishers. After 18 months of development and testing, my curriculum was being piloted in 15 schools across 3 states. My family saw the news coverage. My mother sent an email congratulating me and suggesting we should reconnect now that I calmed down and was doing something worthwhile. I archived it without responding. James and I stayed friends, real friends. We video chatted weekly, visited each other a few times a year, and genuinely cared about each other's lives. He eventually met someone, a museum curator named Sophia, who challenged him intellectually and didn't care about his money. I stood up in their wedding, for real this time. I dated occasionally but stayed single, focusing on building my business and discovering who I was outside of family dysfunction. Some people thought it was sad that I wasn't in a relationship. I thought it was liberating. 3 years after Frankfurt Airport, my sister got married. I wasn't invited, which was fine. I sent a wedding gift anyway, a beautiful set of china, because I could afford to be gracious now. She sent a thank you note that was clearly written by someone else, probably her assistant. My parents retired to Florida. They sent Christmas cards with photos of themselves on the beach, looking happy and relaxed. I sent cards back with photos from my travels, looking equally happy. We were better to each other from a distance. The business continued to grow. I hired staff, expanded the curriculum, started training other educators. The work was meaningful in ways my previous teaching had been, but amplified. I was helping children develop tools to recognize unhealthy family dynamics and build emotional resilience. Every kid who learned to set boundaries was a small victory. Emma asked me once if I regretted how everything had happened. No, I said honestly. Being abandoned in that airport was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to find my own strength instead of constantly looking for my family's approval. And the fake marriage? That was just the beginning. James gave me space to figure myself out, resources to build something new, and friendship with no ulterior motives. He showed me what supportive relationships actually look like. I thought about my family sometimes, wondering if they ever understood what they'd done. Probably not. People rarely recognize their own patterns of behavior, especially when those patterns have worked for them historically. My sister still had my parents' full attention and financial support. My mother still controlled family narratives. My father still valued appearances over authenticity. But none of that was my problem anymore. I built a life where I wasn't constantly managing other people's emotions or apologizing for taking up space. I had work that mattered. Friendships based on mutual respect. And peace that came from living authentically, instead of performing for approval. The girl who'd stood crying in Frankfurt Airport, believing she had nothing and no one, would barely recognize the woman I'd become. She'd been so focused on what she'd lost that she couldn't see what she was about to gain. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the door you needed someone to push you through. You just have to be brave enough to keep walking once you're on the other side. So, I'm genuinely curious, if you had been in my shoes, completely abandoned and desperate, would you have accepted a stranger's wild offer? Or would you have found a different path? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think.